of my lips and the meditations of all our hearts be now and always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen.
Amen.
So every time this week that I have tried to think about the readings for today and to think about what to say about them, I kept coming back to one phrase from John, verse 18. I will not leave you orphaned. And maybe because that's the promise I most need to hear right now from Jesus. I will not leave you orphaned. And I know he is speaking to a particular people in a particular moment, but still we call this a living word, and we invite God to speak to us anew through it. So here today is what I hear God saying. I will not leave you orphaned. Because how do we know that God is present with us? Really, how do we know when we are in the presence of God? I mean, we have these texts that tell us in so many words that God is with us, but hearing it and knowing it isn't the same as feeling it, right? And for me, for many Anglicans, maybe, but I'll try not to make assumptions, one of the ways that we knew that God was with us is in the sacraments, in the Eucharist, and in the holy water with which we renew the mark of our baptism. After all, that's what sacraments are for. They are outward and visible signs of an inward and spiritual grace given by Christ as sure and certain means by which we receive that grace. Sure and certain. We used to joke in seminary about why we all did our preaching courses with the Presbyterians, because we all did our preaching courses with the Presbyterians. Because in the Anglican tradition, no matter how bad the preaching is, you could still rely on Jesus to show up for communion. But for those who have been raised and formed in a sacramental tradition, it isn't about the bread or the water. It's the sureness and the certainty of God's presence among us. I miss that. This one thing that week after week, as I'm sort of finding my way in a new place with new responsibilities, it's this one thing that I was sure of. And in the strength of Article 26, the unworthiness of ministers, which hinders not the effect of the sacrament, I had this promise that no matter how badly I messed up or what mistakes that I had made, if I stood at that table in your midst with bread and wine and holy word, and you, the people of God, if we did that together, Jesus was with us. It was sure and certain. And it will be again, of that I have no doubt. But in the meantime, here we are, knowing that he would not leave us orphaned, but also maybe slightly less certain and slightly less sure. I mean, we know how to connect in real and meaningful ways with God, the Creator, the face of God that Paul describes to the Athenians, God who made the world and everything in it. And I am so grateful that the provincial parks and conservation regions are beginning to open again, that we can get outside under the sky and feel the earth under our feet. And I am so glad that gardening season is upon us. I mean, not for me, but for those of you who garden, that we can feel the earth under our hands and know that we are bound up and connected with every tender shoot and mighty tree. We know that there are sure and certain ways to connect with God, the creator and maker of all things. And as we prepare for the Feast of Pentecost, We hear this promise from Jesus about the advocate, the Spirit of truth, who will be sent. And maybe you've had what the world calls a spiritual experience, where it is as if something holy descended upon you, something from outside yourself, beyond yourself, that transformed or connected or inspired you. And we expect those moments to be fleeting. We don't expect to be able to summon them. They happen when the Spirit chooses. The unsureness and uncertainty of those moments is in their very nature. But how can we know that Jesus is with us if he isn't here in bread and wine and water? Well, he told us. Here in the farewell discourse, as he was saying goodbye to his friends, as he was saying goodbye in word and in action, sharing this meal and washing their feet and promising them, I will not leave you orphaned. And this dinner, this long conversation, this back and forth between Jesus and the disciples, this long discourse, there are three threads that get interwoven over and over and over again throughout it, about love and abiding and command and obeying. And this brief section includes that troubling if again, but we talked about that last week. As John wrote it and as Jesus spoke it, this is not a conditional if. This is an if that doesn't have an if not. It is, if you love me, and we both know that you do, then you will keep my commandments. I love you, so I command, and you love me, so you obey, and I command you to love, and I love you, so I abide. You love me, so I abide, and I abide in you, so you keep my commandments. And when you keep my commandments, I abide in you, and I abide in love, and you abide in me. And by the time all of that interweaving has happened, one of the things that Jesus has said is this, that when you can no longer see me at the end of my life, this is how you will recognize me. That whenever something moves you to love one another as I commanded, you will know that I am there. So here is what I know. That our God, the maker of heaven and earth and all that dwells within it, is present in every time and in every place, and so is with you and is with me. But I also know this, that sometimes knowing that is not enough. That I grope for a sign, something that I can feel and touch and hold and taste. And I also know this, that Jesus knew that that would be true for his disciples, for his friends, and he knew that it would be true for all of us who would come after. And Matthew, Mark, and Luke all tell us how they would find Jesus among them when they could not see him. They would know him in the breaking of bread. That we would know him when we remembered him, whenever 2 or 3 were gathered together and we broke bread together. But John doesn't offer us, this is my body which is given for you, do this in remembrance of me. John gives us this: love one another. Love one another. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Whenever something moves you to love one another, as I commanded, you will know that I am there. Where love is tangible, Jesus is made manifest. just as certain and just as sure. Do you want to hear Jesus? Pick up the phone in love. Do you want to see Jesus? Cut out fabric pieces for protective masks until you're cross-eyed, and then you can see Jesus. Do you want to feel Jesus? Join a birthday parade, bring joy to strangers, and pay attention to who is in the car with you. Do you want to taste the presence of Jesus? Well, make a couple dozen sandwiches or frozen dinners or soup to give to those who are hungry. After 2 months together, can you still find a way to reach out with tenderness and touch the person who has been dancing a tango on your very last nerve? There Jesus is. Love. The act of love, the doing of love, the living of love is how we open our senses to the reality of God's steadfast love and abiding presence. This is how you will recognize me whenever something beyond yourself moves you to love one another as I commanded. You will know that I am there. So maybe this is a gift, this time for which we are cut off from the sacraments. The sacraments which are, if we're being honest, the easier way to find Jesus in our midst. Maybe this is like that moment after the lights go out and there is nothing but darkness until your eyes adjust and you can see clearly enough to find your way. We who are so used to finding the presence of God in bread and in wine, here is a moment where we can awaken different sensors and strengthen different muscles in order to seek and find him in this new world. Because we know how. We have always known how. He told us. This is how you will recognize me. Whenever something moves you to love one another as I commanded, you will know that I am there. Where love is made tangible, Jesus is made manifest. Love one another. And there he is, abiding. It is certain and sure. Thanks be to God.